Hey, it's Jen and Jewellyn with Autonomy Learning, and we are back today after a little bit of a respite for the holidays, and we've got another strategy to talk about.
Yep, we're going to talk about noticing and naming our feelings, and we'll unpack that a little bit today, all with that big end goal always of empowering our kids with strategies so they can become their most confident and capable selves.
Yeah, so it kind of started out a little bit with my family. We went away on a trip and we were all together in a really small space.
Mm.
And I was having a conversation with one of my boys, and all of a sudden he's like, I'm having some really strong feelings. And I'm like, okay. So, he was doing a really great job of not letting those overwhelm.
Mm-hmm.
But he and I started to kind of unpack how he could kind of think about that feeling, which could then help him manage. So we started having a conversation. He's like, I'm frustrated and I'm angry at my brother. And so I said, so what is kind of more specific like about that? Are you disappointed because he didn't live up to some expectation? Are you, you know, um, feeling like he's humiliated you and there's some anger around that? Like, what is specifically? And he started to kind of think about it, and he's like, oh, there are different layers of feeling frustrated. And if I can really like pinpoint it, like I want him to do something, and maybe, what do I have control over? Am I expressing that to him?
Mm-hmm.
Is it that I'm not expressing something to him? So he started to kind of unpack it, and he said, Mom, now that I'm thinking about what I have control over in this, and I can really name specifically what I'm feeling,
Mm-hmm.
he's like, I think I'm feeling a little like disappointed that he didn't follow through, but I didn't make it clear. And so then all of a sudden he's like, that made it so much easier for me to manage my feelings about it, because when I start thinking about, well, how could he do something that I'm expecting if I never really expressed it?
Mm-hmm.
Then I realize, like, why am I frustrated? I need to be better. What I can do is communicate that better.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so again, it just kind of reframed how the whole situation went down, instead of him exploding at his brother and just like being angry and feeling in the feeling and just being like, I'm so mad at you.
And it does feel like that, especially with some of those bigger emotions, right? It
Right.
almost feels like it floods your system.
Sure.
And it makes it hard to move beyond just the physical sensations, right?
Right.
And it's really helpful for ourselves and for our kids to be able to have just a simple way to pause that flood of emotions and just study it almost like from the outside for a moment, right? And that really shifts our brain into a different way of a different stance.
Right.
And a different way of processing a situation, right? Rather than just feeling what we're feeling, we're pausing, okay, well, what is this feeling?
Right.
And let's give it a name.
Right. And then, okay, now I can problem solve that, right?
Yes.
Rather than just going into, I'm just going to vent and let it all out.
Totally.
And now we have a bigger problem because now we're just venting and emotions are everywhere. And then the other person's reacting. So it really helped him take a minute, again, to pause and have a conversation with me, which, I was welcoming to him. And he said, thanks, Mom, for really letting me, kind of walk through that process. Because if I had said, okay, you're frustrated, let me help you fix it, let's see what, really my questioning and my kind of prodding him helped him solve the problem. And that felt way more empowering. And it's something that he could do now on his own rather than having to come back to me each time.
And I'm hearing too, you kind of gave him some different words to consider. And
yeah, he's like,
reflect.
Oh, disappointment? I guess maybe. I mean, how, like, understand.
So but that's big, right? Because the emotional vocabulary that we give our kids may seem like a small deal, but is really a pretty empowering thing to be able to say, okay, I feel embarrassed. I feel frustrated, mad, scared, right? And just to sit in a feeling and then give it a name is actually a really empowering, small but big step. Right. And really empowering for kids. So it's funny because I ended up reading an article about how many feelings there are, right? All these, there's like so many emotions depending on which way you choose to count.
I think Brene Brown says 87.
And there are some counts that are more than that, right? But I kind of was just having a conversation with my boys, and I was curious, like, how many feelings can you actually name? And they kind of got into it.
Kind of made it like a game.
Yeah, because if you have this broad emotional vocabulary, then you have more choices and you can get more specific, and then you can more mindfully choose a response rather than just a knee-jerk reaction to a situation. And anytime with kids and with ourselves that we can cultivate that pause before just reacting, that's empowering, on just that surface level too.
And that's kind of back to what we had talked about before about taking that breath,
Yes.
How that breath helps with that pause. So really something to tangibly do with kids is teach them to pause and take a breath, and then if it's that space, it's creating that space before we react to kind of notice it and name it.
Absolutely. So the power of modeling that for our kids, and then having the words to cultivate that emotional climate in our house.
Absolutely.
And really powerful.
All right. So comment below, subscribe to our Motivation Minute, and we'll see you next week.